I have to check out the right. This Meanwhile, let me check audio because I actually forgot to what to what did I forget to? It sounds so well sometimes. Am I going crazy? Why does it sound well now? Anyways, um, wow, what? No, sorry. I was yeah. I have a pin. I was like, hi, this message, and I clicked on pin. So I'm so good at this thing called streaming services and such. So let me let me copy that again and pin that again. Wow, so clever. Copy. Yeah. Uh, here. Yeah. What? What can I? Okay, there it is. This. Tracker. I removed the tracker. Yeah. There we go. Now you pin that. Yeah. I can't. I I can't delete. Wait. This thing I hide. Okay, there it is. I can. I can't reply to myself. That is what I can't do. I understand that now. Anyway, do we have anything else to do? Yeah, I have. Now, besides, I'm playing my mouse. Do I have anything else to do? I don't think so, right? Um, do I? I might be forgetting something. I am incredibly capable of forgetting stuff, so I wouldn't be surprised at me forgetting something. Um, I realized something. I have a tendency to have the microphone closer to the right side of my. Why? I tend to also. I don't know. Interesting observation, I guess. Anyway, the point is here we are. Um, do you actually have anything else? No, I think no, right? I could eat a candy. Maybe not. Maybe we can save it for later. For when the time to have a break comes. That's a nicer idea. Something along the lines of meditation, that thing which you calm yourself down, you you refocus your energies onto yourself and make sure that you are capable of working properly. Blah blah blah. Maybe. I don't think so. The point is, no, yeah. I don't. I. Can we wait for 3 minutes in the clock? In the countdown clock? Three, two, one. Wow. So amazing. Good evening. Good evening. Ah, it's Friday? No, it's Tuesday. Yeah, it's Tuesday actually. Um, I was forgetting something. I you learn to live. I cannot say that I hate that. You learn to live with those things that happen in which you're hit by the moment of realization for some random reason only after you have like crossed the threshold or something like that. I forgot to have the stream open on the other tab just to check. I am so there it is. Wow. So, what's up? Today, what do we even have in store for today? Um, I have the okay here we have it. The message, the title, the ideas, the concepts are only two. I think to some degree we don't really have the necessity to talk about much more. Not let's say like this. I think that sometimes it's quite easy to actually handle a longer list of things in terms of yeah there is so much to talk about and whatnot, and other times it's simpler. I guess I wouldn't say nicer. I am trying to live with that constant reminder that yeah, it's somewhat negative to actually utilize language that codes things in that sense. Oh yeah, this thing is nicer, this thing is better or more worse and such, encoding the word as if everything was good or bad, evil and pure and such is kind of weird. So um, I think it ends up being more useful to actually, in some instances, utilize just a very select list of things to actually observe, focus over, focus on, I guess, something like that. And yeah, in this case, that's why we end up being here. I don't think that we actually require much more. Not not because there are not other things to talk about, but yeah, rather because it's better to just pay more attention, something along those lines, It ends up being better. Once you actually have the capacity to sit down and focus on the things that you actually care about enough, it's far better to spend as much time, I wouldn't say investigating, it's along the lines of reaching a proper comprehension, something along those lines, of any of those topics, rather than to just diversify yourself for the sake of what actually. I don't think I have an actual answer. It's for the sake of something that always remains unclear. For, I guess, the easiest answer that I always have is something along the lines of just because it ends up being easier to not actually look at anything for long enough, that discomfort that comes from realizing that you're actually utilizing your time in just one thing. I guess this trait that we end up realizing in or performing, I guess, in the modern world in which you have to trade something of the time that you have, some of the time that you possess is traded for the obtenance of the goal that you have in mind. The issue is sometimes you realize that the thing that you're actually going for might be quite more complex and far more, not exactly dangerous, but along the lines of something quite more surprising to some degree. And yeah, that's where I find that also to be the case. As in being here, it's also therefore better to not be so thinned out, I guess it's the expression. Yeah. So I hope I don't have anything else to say besides that or about all the other things. Yeah. Today then, going back, tracing back, what are we here for? What what has congregated us? I found I was thinking the preface as always is I was thinking a little bit and it was an interesting realization. After all, yeah, unavoidably, it's I don't wanna say I remember having heard that very recently this concept of I have free will. Unavoidably, everyone has free will, despite the conscious realization that you have it or not. It's something along the lines. It goes a little bit more on the level of okay, with the usage of my own time and will to do stuff, I might be interested in just following this path. And because I am going to force myself to do that, no matter what, I will end up disregarding the possibility to actually enjoy the thing that I am doing. Not because it doesn't matter, but rather because I cannot understand how necessary it is for instances of this sort to also be embedded with enjoyment, so to speak. So, one of the many realizations that came out of that was wow, not so surprisingly, unavoidably, we can be here and we can actually spend time in this place in the sense of it's possible to have discussions about things without actually following just that the eternal thing that I always refer to, that list and such, that I am trying to talk about when I say, oh yeah, the list of topics and whatnot. And it's also useful to understand that, yeah, sometimes I guess some ideas end up gaining a lot more importance over others, and it's more useful in itself to actually be capable of expressing those rather than to just follow the already given order. Sometimes it might even be far more risky to abandon anything else because at the end of the day, unavoidably, if we forget something that ends up mattering, that ends up having an actual weight in what we are trying to talk about or think about and such, it ends up becoming quite a loss in both sides, I guess. In this case, it's not just on the sense of, oh, yeah, I might not be capable of saying something, and I won't feel good on myself unavoidably. If, on the other hand, something ends up being missed because think about it universally. If the person who knows that they have the possibility of talking about anything and they chose to ignore the things that they actually have finally reached a realization towards because they might not be capable of appreciating enough what is it that they might understand at any level. If that happens and the person ends up missing something of a huge importance, actually, the time in which they finally come back to that topic, it ends up being rather a negative event and a loss of sorts. So yeah, in that case, that's I guess the explanation of why we might be going a little bit quote unquote off script. It's it's not like anyways the other things had that much of an script anyways. So we have going back. We only have two topics today, and we have to see how much they are going to actually take. The first one is a little bit not so complex to some degree because yeah, I have to accept it's quite an easy task to trace back on your own steps and to be self-referential. That idea of being a self-referential being ends up being quite present in most cases, not because it actually has any usefulness, but rather because the person is far more capable of doing that, nothing else. And accepting that that is the case instead of trying to work towards the change of their behavior, so to speak, and to be always inventing something new that doesn't need to be connected to anything else. More so because the world is full of things that are always in relation to already existing stuff. So, trying to finally explain a little bit more clearly what I am trying to say with that. Something that happens in this case is, yeah, first topic, will to do. To some degree, um, I have already tried to talk out this before. It's one of those, I said before, the concept of power, you might also find it as will, the different places in which you might be capable of reading about something of that sort end up illuminating the concept itself a lot more, because it's something that is always present in any kind of lecture about philosophy to some degree. The notions about the interest of the person and the immersion of the human in the tasks that they want to perform and such, and the desire to act on the world, and the impact of their own actions and all of those things. There are, I guess, unavoidably, to some degree, the human is always trying to wrap their head around the concept of what is it that moves us, not just on the more, it's not exactly basic, but on the superficial level of, okay, yeah, I might have these factors that make me possess an interest in doing these things or these goals that I want to achieve, but also the reason as to why any of those might be valid, might become invalidated by anything else. Why do we believe that we need to act on them on such? All of those questions that can, I guess, allow the human being to move beyond the phase of just staying on the analysis paralysis stage, in which it's not exactly just analysis paralysis, it's just the moment of reflection in which one asks themselves, okay, what is it that I am trying to achieve with any kind of thing, with this next action that I am going to take? What is it that I am trying to actually get out of my own time, out of my own strength, out of my own existence? What is it that I am going for? And questions of that sort are, I guess, universal. At any point in time, it's reasonable to say that humans are wondering about such a thing, because no matter how much we have evolved, it does come down to a far more singular level, and an individual type of analysis in which the person themselves who tries to understand this question has to actually come to a proper realization of sorts that allows them, the singular individual, to be capable of acting in accordance with whatever is it that they want, they desire, they do not want to see as a consequence, blah blah blah. All of those things, therefore, are, once again, as I was trying to explain, this is a recurring theme throughout. I wouldn't just say philosophy, it's a realistic idea that, yeah, it started with philosophy, and later on, I guess, yeah, it did gain a lot more reign over this sort of question about why is it that I want to do stuff and such. The whole analysis of the mind, the soul, and such in this more modern conception in which you have the self, the person, the individual completely isolated from all the other factors, in which, yeah, at that point, I don't think it's all that crazy to say that it ended up even becoming a question of psychology, I guess. And yeah, will to do, the will to be, the will to do stuff. That is the first stage, or the first analysis to perform today, and that is, as always, it's something intricate within itself. I think let me start with this. I think it's quite an interesting realization that, yeah, in many ways, the question of what is it that I want to do possesses such a weight in the life of any person, because up until we reach these so-called stages of maturation, most of us might as well believe that it is not so possible for anyone to actually be capable of defining what is it that we want to do with dearest thing that exists, or that we can possess a more earned or more stable sense of existence, of knowledge, acknowledgement about its existence or self. We know that we are capable of existing. We don't. We can try to spend time talking about stuff like, oh yeah, the Descartes' explanation about the self and how to be sure that you exist and whatnot. Not going to go through the whole philosophical steps and inquiry about how anyone gets to be and such. Just the idea that the human can be certain, if anything, if nothing else, sorry, about their own existence. Once we get to understand that, then the first stage of the question becomes, okay, what is it that we want to do with ourselves, with our own life, with our own being, with our own time, with our own anything that relates to us. At that point, it becomes an interesting, and I have to. I think it's not truly something easy to admit, but I guess it is realistic. It's a necessary question after all. The human has to possess an interest in trying to understand what they can do. The will to be capable of doing something cannot be born out of somebody who hasn't actually understood what is it that they might accomplish at any point in their own existence. Do not diminish that so much to just an abstract. Let's say it like this: the person, any human being has the capacity to think about, once again, first and foremost themselves. So it becomes necessary then that if we want to do something of any kind, we have to understand, or we have to want to understand, what is it that we might be capable of doing? What is it that constitutes us and the capacities that we might possess, so that we can then shape the sense of the possible things to do and to accomplish into something which we can actually work on, instead of just staying in the realm of, oh yeah, yeah, you know what, I have I have my own life, and I know that I have to want things. I hear that all the time. Everyone around me keeps on going on and on about the necessity of having a goal in life, you know? And something that I have realized is I don't actually want to have one. Not because I think that it is meaningless, but rather because I just can't figure out how to have. How can I actually have a goal for me? How can I actually have a goal that allows me to be free, you know? Or that allows me to anything. It's, in this case, I am already imposing freedom as a sort of goal. I want to do something that allows me to be free. Okay, no. Then I might want to do something implying that it is actually a desirable thing. I hear that everywhere. I don't even understand why. Then, unavoidably, the first stage is for the person to be capable of generating, of appreciating that instinct that is already existent on any human being, that allows us to actually choose what is it that we might want to go with our own life. What are the things that we might wish to get done with our own existence and such. And once that is done, then we can finally continue moving towards anything else that might bring some sort of satisfaction. It's, let's say like this, if I don't have an actual will behind my actions, I might not be capable of gaining anything that allows me to sustain myself in any meaningful way. In this case, it is still quite an empty sentence, so yeah, let me try to color it a little bit more with, if we as human beings do not possess or do not understand that we possess the right to discover and actually comprehend what is that moves us to do things, and have in our mind a clear reason behind why is it that we're actually performing any kind of thing. The consequences of the actions that we take might as well not be as consequential themselves, as capable of moving anything else in existence, as those kind of actions that actually create consequences which we might be not even looking forward to, but we might be capable of doing or or observing in terms of, because the action itself was something that we possessed an interest on, because the goal that might have come, the possibilities that might be created out of the action itself are what we are after. That is the, once again, I don't think it is at that stage the first point. It might as well be the second layer. I can understand that I exist. I can understand that I might have the capacity to think out what I want to do with my own life and such. Then, at that point comes the question of, okay, what is it that I might actually want to do with my own life? And then, yeah, I get to discover what is it that as a person I can do. I guess I want to reduce it to, oh yeah, it's just something not so easy to answer. It does have some level of nuances to it in terms of, oh yeah, we end up being so different despite all the other similarities that we possess between one another in terms of particular capacities. More so because, clearly enough, at the states in which any one of us possesses the capacity to start to think abstractly about these sort of concepts, what starts to separate us has already been so defined and worked on by each of us that no matter how hard we try to become like someone else, there will still be so many other things that, in essence, make the different persons that exist out there unique from one another. So, if I have to wonder about what is it that I want to do, I have to then be capable of understanding that the answer that I might discover needs to be something that the personal I, the actual truly self identity, that thing which I call myself, is something that actually wants. Not just, oh yeah, I don't know. Everybody wants to live in a happy world or in a just world in which things go nicely and such. supposedly. Do I understand why am I saying those things? Do I get to realize if that is the case for me too? Can I, even if it might be, I don't know, socially wrong for somebody to say, oh yeah, I want to see the world burn, something along those lines. Even if that is the case, can I actually realize what is it that I want? At that point, it already becomes a question of, okay, I have to discover not exactly myself. It does pertain to the self in terms of, okay, what is it that I, as a person, as an individual, once again, might wish to have, to do, to go for, and such. Then, at that level, it becomes the second stage of what is it that I will start to do. It's the will to do. Now we are finally talking about the actual topic. The will to do then becomes that second stage in which the, any human being has actually realized what is it that they want. It's the will becomes the so-called spirit of humans behind their actions that leads what they do and what they are motivated for, because in itself is the answer that we possess for the life that we decide to carry on. And that is then the thing that we are capable of being the closest to. We get to understand what moves us towards anywhere. Therefore, we get to actually be interested in doing things that might allow us to reach for as much as we can of that one thing that we say that we desire. And so we find ourselves having a not so hard time, not because it actually is a hard existence, or sorry, not because it stops being a hard existence, but rather because in actuality, the true, the truthness of the issue is, wow, we have a reason for being. And so, in that reason for being, that reason behind the existence that we carry is capable enough of justifying many of the other aspects of life itself. So, to have a will to do something is, in essence, to have the capacity to remain afloat in life. That's that's why I say. Let me say it like this. Parenthesis, tiny parenthesis. That's why I say it's to some degree the thing that both philosophy and psychology share in common. It's not a question so much of, oh yeah, yeah, the will to do as that thing that moves people. It actually is something that also goes a little bit beyond just that analysis. Imagine that you meet somebody that has a will to do nothing, or actually no will at all to be, let's say, can you say that actually that person is living a good life? Even if they are just living for the sake of the pleasure that they might experience from a day to day basis? Or even, I don't know, you can be condescending and say something along the lines of, oh yeah, I have met somebody who is completely lost in their addictions to drugs or to substance abuse and such. Even if that were to be the case, you can still identify that that person is being moved by something. They have a will that allows them to exist, even if it is not something that you personally agree with. The issue is, what do you think happens when you see that somebody has a will to not do anything, or once again, sorry, a lack of will of any sort? Do you see somebody actually living a life? In many cases, what we can find is in that analysis, once we get to understand the question itself from a general perspective, the analysis and how to apply this question to others becomes far more apparent. Yeah, somebody might not have a will, therefore it stops being such a wonder why they might not be living a life that I myself can call nice, good, filled with anything, you know? It's it's properly encompassing. I wouldn't say an all encompassing. I am not somebody who talks about universals all that much. I do speak in universal terms, in terms of, yeah, I try to not stay in overly specific scenarios, but unavoidably, no concept that I actually speak about is wholly universal as a whole. I don't like to do that. So, continuing, I guess closing the parenthesis, yeah. Moving on. On that same analysis, then, the question continues being, then we understand that the person possesses a will of sorts. What is it that they actually want to do? What is it that they are actually doing? What is it that allows them to continue towards any kind of bad question and such? If that is something that we can appreciate and put into proper perspective, then it becomes a far more easy to answer question the issue or the inquiry about why people do stuff. The will itself is the thing that keeps humans alive. Once again, or I guess trying to tie it back with what I have mentioned before, this concept of power. Humans possess a power to do anything to some degree, but what matters is not just the power. What matters is the will. What matters is what we do with that power. Okay, then, can I focus on something that I actually want? That is the part in which the will enters into the play. What is it that I am willing to do? What is it that I am moving myself to accomplish? What is it that I am actually trying to get done? What are the aspects of existence that I am trying to accomplish? What are the things that I am working on and such? If all of those aspects, if all of those questions get to be properly answered, then yeah, unavoidably, I will be capable of finding something that leads me. I wouldn't say just to happiness. I don't think in terms of, oh yeah, yeah, it will lead to eternal bliss. I guess it might be misleading to promise something like that. We are not yet in a stage in which we can use such, I guess, strong imagery, such strong sensations of sorts. So, continuing. To have a will, then, the will to do is what allows us to move towards anywhere. Yeah, we have the capacity to be a sort of anything, as long as we're capable of devising any plan towards the accomplishment of that desired goal. But what matters is not the intrinsic capacity that anyone has, but rather the desire that the person possesses towards the accomplishment of things. Yeah. So, why does this matter? Because, in a sense, one of the many realizations that the human has throughout time, we get to observe many things. One of the many things that we got to properly appreciate nowadays is the realization of, wow, I might want things that don't actually benefit me in a proper way or that don't actually build me up in any manner. I don't want things because I understand why I want them. I am not willing to do stuff because I know that I am truly willing to do it. I'm just willing to do something because I have become accustomed to that sensation of wanting to do something, sort of. It's a complicated play of my own willingness becomes something that the rest of the world learns to utilize. I wouldn't say in my favor against me, it's something that just becomes utilized for different reasons out there, and that I can integrate back into myself without realizing that it has been affected. So let's say it like this so that we can understand a little bit more. With an example, it will be something along the lines of I am willing to talk out this stuff right now, but if I get offered something like money, I might be willing to, while talking about this, have in the middle of this conversation a sponsor break just to gain that money. And I might not be capable of understanding what is it that I'm promoting, but I have a goal that allows me to gain something else while continuing to do the things that I truly want to accomplish. And in many cases, that is the modern life of the human being, how we get many things inserted into the part of our life that we understand we want without actually observing why is that the case. Let's say it like this. I understand that I want money to sustain myself. I don't understand exactly what I might be promoting. I don't need to understand that if I get to gain enough money to be happy. Because in the end, I don't actually want money for the sake of wanting money. I want money to be capable of having a good life. Therefore, I want to do something that allows me to get that desired good life. Therefore, I'm willing to do something that I might not understand so much so that I can obtain my true goal. But I, because I just want something and I am not so willing to see what is it that I am actually doing, I don't want. I will clarify this. I don't like the term I'll corrupt myself. Corruption is something that happens, I will say, with far more consciousness to some degree. In a sense, I just get persuaded to do something that might not be truly in accordance with that aspect that belongs truly to myself. Just because my desire is something that has much more control of me. I want to live a good life, but I don't understand exactly what might lead to that. So I am willing to do things that might not get me exactly to the utmost nicest life of sorts. Therefore, I'm willing to do something that might harm others who are around me. I am willing to do something that might harm my own image. I am willing to do stuff of that sort. I'm willing to do something even that might harm my own existence to some degree because I want another thing. My will towards this object of desire is such that I lose sight of all the other aspects of my own life. So, I wouldn't say this is a reasonable statement. Thus far, in what the human life has come to see as necessary, in the way in which we have approached existence, the most common answer has been all of us should have a will to continue living. Therefore, if the first concept that needs to be instilled in anyone is to possess a will to live, a will to be, and to continue doing anything else as long as we're alive, it becomes then a necessary step for the rest of our life. That's the one in which we're actually trying to observe What is it that allows us to possess such a prolonged existence? A good, worth living life. Once again, I'm not stating, not trying to say that I fully have the capacity to agree or let's say like this. I'm not somebody who is trying in this case to make the point of, oh yeah, you cannot ever say anything that goes against that concept of, yeah, we all have stuff that we want and such, so you have therefore to also want the same stuff as everyone else. But the notion, the accepted concept is, yeah, we have to live, we have to be. So if the first, I don't want to say commandment, if the first rule of life is to actually want to continue living for as much as we can, everything else that has to do with will might have to go through a filter of, is this something that actually contributes towards my own life, or is this something that doesn't allow me to do or to live anything good? At that point, I don't want to say that it becomes more complicated, it's just another step. It becomes more elaborated, certainly, but to call it complicated and to simplify it as, oh yeah, this thing just becomes harder to do. No, it isn't actually along those lines. It's something that we all get accustomed to do. At some point, let's say like this, you literally live your whole life understanding that you actually have to want to do something, that you actually have to possess an interest in existence itself. So is it that surprising that after years or decades of living in that same cycle, you have become accustomed to that? Maybe, I don't know. Once you are a child, you are struggling to get that idea at first because unavoidably it comes out of nowhere. You don't understand why is it necessary to have an instinct of self-preservation or try to go a little bit beyond that instinct and actually move yourself towards something that allows you to keep, despite any other desire, any other thing that you might want, moving towards life itself. Why you might want to have something like that might be hard to comprehend at a first glance, but after the thousandth time, after the millionth time in which you have considered this same issue, it isn't all that surprising. It's it's a different discussion, and I wanted to talk about that in another day. But yeah, it gets to do with that idea of things are quite repetitive in nature. At some point, after having answered a million times the question of, is this something that allows me to live or not? You start to see how to far more rapidly answer the question itself. Yes, because it has to do with this. No, because it has to do with this other aspect. Are any of the substances that get me high, for example, let's say good? No, because maybe they put my awareness of reality in such a state that I might commit actions that go against my own will to self-preserve and such. Stuff of that sort becomes a far more lubricated mechanism in the mind of anyone who, once again, gets to understand that. The issue is, as I said before, to imply that we all understand it, that we have a will to do something, is sort of a tragedy because it's not so apparent. Not always we get to see how the will to be or such exists and manifests in all of us. It's easy to say in the void of nothingness, but once you try to trace, okay, What is it that I am trying to actually accomplish with my own life? What is it that I am trying to actually go for? What are the things that I am doing to make sure that this goal of mine becomes real and such? Once all of those questions get to be asked and answered, the realization that the person might come towards might not be as ideal as they might have wanted otherwise. So that's why then, yeah, we have a need to try and understand what we are doing. We have a need to try and make sense out of the stuff that makes us move. That I guess the expression, the more poetic expression is we have the capacity to understand what makes our own heart beat. So we have the right to do so. We have the obligation to actually possess that same thing that leads us to be, so that existence isn't something that we are just subjected to, but rather it's something in which we are subjects of the desire which leads us to the accomplishment of those aspects which allows us to say that we are as free as we can be within the boundaries of our own self, so to speak. No, let me drink some water actually. Now, to some degree, I was I have been trying to explain this for quite a bit now. If the will to do might as well be similar to the will to be, and this is something that everyone has to struggle with, why do we need to spend so much time trying to delve into something that ends up being so personal? Once again, there are many aspects of this type of questions that we end up assuming are universally understood, and sadly, the way in which all of us are encoded doesn't get to be just solely because of our own existence. We are also influenced quite a lot by everything else that has to do with ourselves in accordance with the rest of the world. Sometimes ourselves in accordance with that aspect that might not get as satisfied as the rest of our own existence. As I'm trying to not utilize way too specific terms, but yeah, it's something along the lines of, I guess, in the more known terms, my conscious self against my unconscious self. Sometimes I said my will to do is something on one side, moving me towards one aspect of life because it comes from the conscious aspect of myself. On the other one, my unconscious aspect might be moving me towards a completely different direction. And therefore, if this possesses any importance, it doesn't come just because it might matter, but rather because in the life of anyone, it comes a moment in which the person can actually force an interest on the analysis of what is my will moving me towards, and what part of that will comes from something that I truly want to have happen, or if it is something that rather I have, as I said before, just been seduced to accept as necessary from something else. That separation of me against the rest of the world. I don't truly like that. I don't personally accept always posing the self against the rest of the world, or the self against the otherness of the world. But in this case, it does help at the very least to delimitate that. Yeah, sometimes I have stuff that I actually want to have happen. I have stuff that I actually care about. I have things that I move towards myself, and that is true. But that is on one hand. On the other one, I have stuff that I don't actually care about on any other aspect. I have stuff that I don't actually have an interest on from any other side of myself. I have things that I do because I have just become accustomed to them, not because I need to do them to be happy, not because I need to have them going on to sustain the calmness of my own existence. I have habits, I have traditions, I have things that don't play a significant role in my life. But I have never stopped to analyze why am I so willing to do those things. And let's say it like this. Uh, 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 One second, let me make a tiny parenthesis. I guess it's unavoidably, I don't want to say controversial, but it is an interesting analysis, yeah. But closing the parenthesis, it's this concept of if the principle of the wills that lead me to be begins with a life that is as good as it can be, how much of a disservice I am doing to myself when I allow things to plague my willingness towards life to be full of things that I don't actually care about having, that I don't actually care about doing, that I don't actually care about going through, making sure that they happen and such. It's a initial evaluation, and then from that point onwards, an eternal continuous re-evaluation of anything that has to do with the aspect of what allows me to accomplish the truest form of my own will, and the one that I can be the most comfortable with actually having happen in the world. Now, uh, it's okay. Let me turn on my fan because it's getting incredibly hot. And I'm not going to move on. I think I have still something else to add to this. So give me a second. Uh, okay, I'm back. So I was saying, I I tried to start with, yeah, unavoidably. I have stuff that I actually care about. I have stuff that is intrinsic to my own will. I have stuff that has become somehow part of my will because I didn't realize that it started to plague my will itself through the slow acceptance of it. And I might want to discover the way in which I can have the purest form of my personal will accomplished. As a human being, I want to actually live a life that I can be happy on living. Therefore, I need to discover what might make such a life happen. And in that process, unavoidably, all of us have to try to understand what we want. And so, just in case, implying that it wasn't clear enough, the process of analysis and from there on, continual re-evaluation of those constituting parts to our own existence is not something that has to lead to just paralysis, but rather to a more effective way in which life is lived. If there is a good enough will, life itself should be properly experienced. Now, I said before, I'm not trying to promise happiness because that is quite a complicated aspect. Happiness in itself is a wholly different side of existence itself in any human being. And sometimes a will that has to do with properness sacrifices happiness for the sake of pursuing actual completion of the things which we are willing to utilize our existence for, even if it means that there is suffering in cases in which the object of the desire is solid enough the person can truly just let go of that initial quote unquote need for pure satisfaction and nothing else. So, yeah, I'm not saying that a life in which the will is always present is a happy life. It is a proper one, but not always a happy one. But yeah, I guess I know I just to be honest about that, and unavoidably I haven't mentioned anything. I try to stay in the most singular term possible, in the sense of the I and myself and my own life and my own existence and such. And I said before, me towards or contrasted with the rest of the world and whatnot, the issue becomes at some point I can also understand that there is something of me on everyone else, or there is something of everyone else on me. I I didn't quite start this conversation, but I started this stream with the quote, not exact quote, but with something along the lines of, yeah, the way in which we talk about things makes it so that we share a lot of concepts from older times. So there is something of everyone else in us, because at the end of the day, we are capable of sharing that one unifying equalizer element that is the language itself. So we can allow ourselves at some point to understand that the will of the person isn't so singular, something that also has to do with the rest of the wills of the world and the rest of the interest that might be out there being offered. That's why it's quite hard to actually grasp, because otherwise it might feel like it is always based solely on the individual aspect of the satisfaction, but truly it can continue advancing towards a will to do something, not just for my own self, and not just for my own happiness and such. But yeah, we are not yet on that level of analysis. So, moving on. Thank you. Let me now, after having quote unquote properly finished, let me drink some water yet again. What an incredibly lengthy explanation for something that shouldn't be so hard to actually delineate. I, before starting, I remember having heard something. This wasn't particularly about English. This was about the Arabic language. I don't even know which one of them. One of them that said something along the lines of how the person who decides to not be concise and ups and not be more than anything else precise with their language end up hurting the comprehension. I have always loved the way in which things try to be meddled with. Language is something always that can allow the comprehension between any two willing to compare parties. It cannot be something that just because my language is more precise, it's better type of separationist concept in which I exclude those who don't understand every particular nuanced, incredibly niche term. So it's something that unites. It's the eternal debate of something that unites and something that divides, and not something secular, but rather something universally shared and such. But I don't know. On the other hand, yeah, we end up having stuff like these conversations in which language makes it so that we spend lots of time going around something that could be summarized otherwise. But still, I'm just acknowledging the fact that it could have been done differently. I wouldn't have chosen to, anyways. Even if I knew literally by memory every single word of the English dictionary, it doesn't mean that I would utilize all of them. As always, it doesn't make the comprehension itself easier. It just makes the experience of moving towards the ideas faster, but that's it. Not much else. So, I don't need to actually move so fast sometimes. Not if we want to be understood by anyone else, that is, you know? But, continuing. Second topic. So, the second topic is, I want to say something more personal. It's something more current, more tied to the present day. I guess In other times, or in other instances, you can say, yeah, I talk about universals and such, and I talk about the things that might apply anywhere because I think it's easier to do that than to try to explain far more particular events. It's sadly far more difficult to do that, but yeah, um, this one is a little bit more subjective to our current times. The second topic is, as it says there, exhausted world. The second idea is that one in which we talk about how I think I guess the best way in which you can see it is probably this. Nowadays, it is a popular author. His name is Byung-Chul Han. He has, for the last decade, I think, become quite a eminent figure in terms of pointing out how, through his philosophical works, he is quite a brave author, even, but through his precise annotations and literary works, through the analysis of very particular instances of existence itself, through that, he tries to point stuff out about the nature of how we live in a world in which we are fine with being tired. I will say it's a good thing to explore him too, notably because, yeah, he has at this point in time become such a referenced author that I think it's impossible to not find at least traces of what he says in anyone who talks about this. So, with that acknowledgement out of the window, yeah, we're going to be talking about the world in which all of us are tired somehow. I I think I finally started to understand it recently. I I don't like that much these ideas, which require a lot of sacrifice in terms of, oh yeah, I don't know. You can talk about schizophrenia, for example. You can read a lot about the schizophrenic people, which might lead to nothingness, because it doesn't mean that you actually understand the phenomena itself. You just have a theoretical understanding about how this works and how this operates and such. Same thing with, oh yeah, the world that is designed to tire people out. Something very, very similar happens to that same topic. One thing is to try to talk about it without understanding how it truly consumes and affects people. A completely different one is to get to see it happen around you. It's the analysis of the world and how things that otherwise might even sound from a dystopic reality invade or are integral parts of our current life. I would not even say invade, yeah, have become ingrained in societies. It's quite a surprising discovery, but not something that remains hidden to the eye of the person who is actually interested in trying to see if this is something that does happen or not. So, now actually starting, yeah. One of the many crazy things that the world teaches anyone lately is how little efforts might materialisms. And I remember having heard about that since I was a young, I will say rather a children, a very young boy, I guess that's the expression, yeah. And something surprising was to finally get to see where that saying came from. I thought it just was a part of the pessimism of the people who have given up, so to speak, or I am somebody who is pessimistic. Therefore, I don't want you to be a contrarian to me. I want you to be as pessimistic as me, so that we don't have any issue between you and me when we are talking. So, I might try to persuade you to make sure that you also are as negative as me, the things that I think about. I thought that it came from a side like that one, but one of the many surprising things of this world is to see, luckily enough, how this world actually is full of tedious things. Even the most basic processes are embedded in incredibly time consuming, lengthy, and slow to happen events, systems, institutions, everything in this current world, despite how surprisingly fast all that we refer as technology has become, the world itself has gotten a lot slower in many other ways. And the reality ends up being that it takes a lifetime to do things that actually might bring that concept of satisfaction, not just for myself, but also for everyone who is around me in a certain way, or not just in a certain way, in a way in which it is lasting enough for all of us, so to speak, even if it is just our current generation. I have to let go a lot of my own life if I have to actually get things done that have to do with not just me. And things have become of this nature to such a degree that the common equation for everyone is slowly becomes then that, yeah, it's better to just focus on myself than to think about anything else. It starts from even to think about doing something for that thing that before used to be called and used to be quoted so much the greater good. There is slowly a disintegration of the greater good because it might mean way too much at risk. It might need way too much action and interest from the people who participate in that. And it's not in a negative way that I am saying it, it's just that certainly it becomes understandable then why we are not so willing to actually throw 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 years of our life towards the accomplishment of something that might not even come through. Because in the process of that, many things, an infinitesimally huge amount of things might go wrong, for our actual goal to never come true. And this has become so ingrained in the current world that just to think about that is to be confronted by what we have started to accept as a tiresome reality. One of the best tools of persuasion that exist nowadays is this idea of the thing that might take too long. There are many other things that can actually lead to far better results, or even if they are not all that better, they can be seen in the vicinity of time. Just because of that, the weight of the present thing plays a far bigger role than that of the future one, or that is what's being predicated at the very least. So we get acceptant of that fact, and we let that become our nature. And at that point, it does feel like every single one of us slowly becomes a little bit more tired. Because at the end of the day, yeah, we have to slowly come back to that other side of the world in which things might take a little bit longer and things might require a lot more sacrifice, and so much of life has to do with our incredibly little existence in this world. So, how are we going to sacrifice ourselves for anything of that sort? And the way in which we have accepted that has led then to, yes, an accurate way, the portrayal of, oh yeah, society itself seems to be as a whole tired of things. We seem to be far more willing to do great stuff. The average person doesn't have such big aspirations. And that is without mentioning any of the other far more unsurmountable issues that seem to exist out there through so many previous cases. We're also confronted by all of those realities in which people just like me and you have already tried even to solve some of those pressing issues, some of those important problems that even if they are complicated to deal with, they might be necessary to actually solve. And even if that was the case, and somebody fought for them, the system that upholds those problems demonstrated such a resistance that it has become, therefore, implied that it is impossible to solve some of those issues that exist right now. And so, I don't think that it is all that crazy to say, yeah, we are in an era in which, surprisingly, most of us, at the mere thought of having to do something that requires sacrifice, that requires longer time commitment, give up. And the action itself of dreaming for something bigger than just our current life is so difficult to see happen, to try and do. Because yeah, slowly we all become part of that. Or in that sense, because yeah, more than anything else, it's also it's it's not like I can't justify why. It makes sense if everyone else is saying next, all the people that is next to me say how much of a bad idea it is to utilize my youth in something that I can only see the fruits of once I have grown older. Like I don't know, for example, I think something that is not starting, that has been happening since quite a good while. This idea of working for the sake of a retirement, working only for the sake of getting a pension once you grow older. That has thing, that has become a thing of the past. Why would we actually want to sacrifice our present time if we are only going to have those benefits once we grow older? Once we become elders who might not be capable of enjoying life as much in the future and such. We don't even know, first and foremost, if we are going to be alive once that day comes. Or, even worse, we don't even have the certainty that even if we get alive to that day, we are going to survive past than a couple of years for the sake of enjoying that thing that we work so hard for. Does it actually matter? Does it actually have any kind of impact in our existence in a way in which we can actually ensure that this is something worth striving for? Those sort of questions are natural to believe that we have answered, and those sort of things have become integrated in the world in a way in which the common spirit of the society, or to be more generous, of the communities that everyone is a part of, lead to the abandonment of any kind of far more laborious work, far more demanding hope. And in itself, even in some cases nowadays, say that we hope for something has already become a childish delusion of sorts. It's not surprising to see that happening. As I said, there are many instances of that happening, and it is something that has become a part of life now. It is not something that we can actually remove or that we can actually make disappear in any way. Not exactly that we have accepted it, but truly we have made sure that at the very least it isn't removed right now. We are not actively working towards the removal of that. I remember something along the lines of one of the greatest satisfactions of any human being has to do with the realization that the weight of the whole world isn't posed in their back. Not the wholeness of humanity depends on us to any capacity. So that means that we actually have a far better life if we don't have to worry about any of those things. Therefore, in cases like this one, the justifications that we are capable of coming up with, once it becomes a realization that Such thoughts have become accepted in the current times. Such ideas have become naturalized in the current situations that we go through, become stronger and become more necessary. Otherwise, I do have to say that is unavoidably a personal perspective, just to shield it from any other kind of ah, critique. But yeah, what if it were to be the case that actually the world wasn't so left alone? We aren't actually all that abandoned by the rest of society ourselves. It is such a disservice to the rest of the world to not try to give it back anything beyond the mere and most basic level of, oh yeah, I don't know, somebody waves at me in the street. Therefore, only then I am going to wave back at them. It doesn't mean that that is the right thing. I don't need to be a good person only with those who are good with me. What kind of actual goodness I am trying to do onto the world if I only wash back the hand that way washed mine? You know, that expression? It's the same thing here. I am not truly an aspiring person in any kind, an altruist of any sort, if I only stay in the basic level of reciprocity and such. There are more things to do out there. There is more life to experience out there. There are more aspects to existence that can be seen if I am willing to, and if I am interested and capable of actually committing myself to making sure that they happen. Otherwise, my own life is might as well be far more miserable than what it actually needs to be. I might once again. That's where I am trying to go with this personally. Because also there is this weird way of talking about this stuff also that I don't truly get to understand. It's the language of the, as I said before, when that one did happen when we were starting, the language of the good and the bad, the polarizing ways of seeing life, the pleasurable and displeasurable stuff. It's so crazy to see how much, oh yeah, you might have to be tired. You want to accomplish something, you have to tire yourself out. And that is something bad to say. That is something negative to say. I think that one of the most wonderful things of life is to get to go through that experience of actually living for the sake of accomplishing something in the longer run, living in the moment to such a degree that you lose yourself in the process of accomplishing that goal, that lengthy, hard, and incredibly laborious work, goal that only moves further and further away once we start to work on it. It's not so crazy to see that that happens. It's not so bad to want to make sure that that comes through. It's not so bad. It's so strange to see how easily persuaded people become with the stuff that predicated that, yeah, anything relating to those sort of experiences is utterly negative and such. I don't think so. I don't want to say that that is acceptable at all. Sometimes everything that becomes normalized isn't as useful as always. The examples remain in the past. We used to normalize executions before. That doesn't mean that they were actually good, you know? We are normalizing being shied away from that sort of experience. That doesn't mean that it is actually good. That's even more so. We already have people who have gone through that route already. We aren't the first generation who had to see that happen to them. We already had many of those before. And I think it's quite sad to see how normal it is for us to just hear somebody say, no, yeah, your time's being wasted. Don't be so naive and instantly fold. It's sad. Otherwise, we end up like the people who are also old and end up, once you give up, scolding you as much because you didn't actually make sure that you got what you wanted, that you were just another quitter, you were never made for success or for the accomplishment of what you wanted. You have never even tried. It's so weird. It's, I don't want to say an era of judgment that has been part of humanity forever and it is always going to be part of it. We cannot live in a world in which we cannot judge things. But yeah, it's crazy to see that certainly most of these things, at least right now, play a role so much in the, not just the daily, but in the whole life of one's, that so many repercussions end up being had, so many things end up being changed because of that. It's another invisible force that has been affecting so many. And I will say that one I am willing to risk. That even if it is hard to try and not accept that so much, it might be better to fight back against that or not. That's the issue. In this world in which you are in favor or you're against, no, you can also find the way in which you get to talk about stuff. We are just, for example, even this kind of thing is simple enough for us to have the capacity to talk about that in a non-threatening way. That is already a beginning. To have an interest to realize that, yeah, not everything that we hear out there has to be true is already a start to slowly see if actually we can accomplish something that requires some more effort, is to live a better life. Those parts of existence are nice, and those parts of existences can also constitute part of that quote unquote struggle against the status quo. It isn't always with the destruction that you fight stuff. Sometimes it's just by choosing different, I guess. But yeah, it's that sense. I wouldn't say exactly exhausted. It's more like a sleep society. Exhausted enough to not want to think out anything else anymore. But yeah. Anyways, I think that's. I, no, yeah, I don't think I have actually that much more to add right now. So, I think that's it for me today. And thank you. As always, thank you for being here, for the time, the patience, the interest, everything. It's been a very pleasant day, Tuesday. Yeah, have a nice night, evening, day, a rest of the day. Uh, yeah, be happy, be responsible, drink water, hydrate, rest, everything else. And as always, even if we don't get to see ourselves, it has been wonderful enough. Thanks for the time, the patience, the interest, and yeah, good night.